Hello, hello, fifth graders. It is so good to see you all here. We are going to have a short and sweet lesson because you have a couple other things going on later today. And you also have a note taker in Google Classroom that is going to be a really great way for you to capture all of the information that is shared during civics lessons. So I see we have a handful of people who were here and waiting in the chat. So thank you for your patience and understanding. Things happen and it could be very challenging trying to mesh everything up, especially when I have so much awesome things to share with you on on this topic. So let's dive right in. If you are able to, you are going to need the note taker found in Google Classroom. Now, I posted it not too long ago. In this note taker, there are actually going to be two different charts, if you will. The first chart is set up in a kind of like a timeline, okay? Except for instead of going from left to right, it's going from top to bottom. And I've organized it so that we can clearly see the progression of how voting has changed. When we define history, this is a complicated thing to ask any student. How would you define history? This is my favorite definition by far because history is simply this: the study of change over time. I'm going to say this again. History's definition is the study of change over time. If we're learning about the history of voting, that means we are learning about how voting has changed over time. And in the context, when we think of time, we're talking about the beginning of America. And we know that America was founded in 1776. Oftentimes we talk about our Independence Day is one of those moments that we celebrate becoming independent from the British. And when we delve further into our history unit and moving away from civics and voting and civil rights, we're going to be doing a deeper dive into the American Revolution and the moments leading up to it, during, and then what happens right afterwards. But before we zoom in, we are going to zoom out and look at the larger picture of how voting has changed throughout America's history. So we are talking specifically about from 1776 to current day. Now, today I want us to really hold this holiday that we just had. What holiday was that? Because I can see y'all are typing up a storm and it's not really on topic. So I'm going to wait and see what was that holiday we just had a day off of. Because y'all are responding quickly, so I'm going to wait. Anybody, what was that special holiday that we just got a day off of? In fact, this was part of our response in our Do Now this morning was discussing this holiday and the differences of opinion. Thank you, Marco. That's right. Indigenous Peoples Day. I asked you to consider why. Why are we opting to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day over Christopher Columbus? And a lot of this has to do with our understanding of history and certain historical moments. Now, today, when we start going through this, I want you to be able to take these notes. So either you're taking notes by hand or you are taking notes in the note taker that I posted on Google Classroom. We celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons, at least for me, why I started celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day before we before it was recognized by our state as a holiday, uh, is because of the lack of information that has been given about the Native American experience, particularly when we talk about explorers, conquistadors, colonizers. When we first hear Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas, what does this imply? Well, this implies that nobody else in the world had ever seen the Americas. And is that true? Is it true to make a claim that Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas when we know that Native Americans were here from the get-go? In fact, we can find science that has discovered Native American objects, remains of Native Americans who lived thousands of years ago, and scientists have discovered this, right? Have found out and backed up this claim that Native Americans preceded the Americas before Christopher Columbus came and said that he discovered it. And so when this happens, we have to ask ourselves, well, who is telling history? How do these ways of history get passed down from generation to generation? And how can we be open to hearing other perspectives of history? If we are only hearing of Christopher Columbus's perspective, how are we going to understand the experiences of Christopher Columbus, his crew, and people back in England that he spoke about, right? That he traveled with and reported back to. So we've kind of had this larger discussion to frame our understanding of, okay, Indigenous people, we had a day off yesterday. How does this have to do with voting? How does this have to do with voting rights? Well, this is a great point. And thank you. I'm going to give a reminder to Adrian, to a few other people who are typing superfluously in the chat. We are using it. If you do need to spell it, absolutely. Thank you, Dermot, for supporting with supporting correct spelling of Indigenous. That also is the least of our worries right now because you need to be tuned in, and it's really hard to listen and type at the same time, unless you're typing about what I'm saying. So this is the time where we are going to bring it together. Now, what I'm going to be doing is this. If you have your note taker out, we're going to, in the last 2-ish minutes that we're going to be together, because this is going to be a very short lesson, you are going to fill out the second half of that exit ticket, which is a 3 sections where you're going to write down what you observe, what connections, reflections, wonderings you have, or any questions you have. We're going to do a visual thinking strategy. What is this called? A visual thinking strategy. I'm going to show you some pictures. And when I show you these pictures, I would like for you to quietly write down all the things that you observe. And if you see something and you're like, this reminds me of something that I've experienced, you can write that down in the wonderings or reflection section. If you have a question, like when was this photo taken? Why are there only these groups of people in this photo? Okay, you are taking about 30 seconds or longer to write down what you notice. Now, this is a really great thing. If you would like to write down what you notice in the chat so that I can read it out loud and say so-and-so notices this, so-and-so notices that, we will go ahead and do that, okay? But this is the really important thing, is that we are writing down what we observe and are thinking deeply about the photos that I'm showing. So one of my favorite parts of history, and give me a second while I bring this up. One of my favorite parts of history is looking at primary sources. What are they called? Primary sources. And a primary source really is something that has been uh, introduced from that time period. Okay? I'm going to try to make this a bit smaller so that you can see it clearly. Okay, let's hope that that does the trick. And we're going to go through and I'm going to show us some photos. So here's the first photo. Take about 30 seconds. Remember, if you have a noticing that you would like to share out loud in the chat, you may. Writing down any noticings you have from this photo. What do you see? What do you notice? What do you observe? What do you see? What do you notice? What do you observe? Okay, we're going to move on to the next question or the next photo, and it is time for Makerspace. So what I am going to do is this is going to be the second photo I'm going to share with you. And in the exit ticket for today, do not press submit. Okay, this is a two-part exit ticket. Okay, we are going to come back to this exit ticket for our second lesson in this week. Let's look at that second photo very quickly, and we're gonna scroll down to this photo. Ooh, sorry guys. Some funky stuff happening. I'm gonna try and get it so that this whole photo comes into the screen. So what do you see? What do you notice? What do you see? What do you notice? What do you see? What do you notice? So after you get a few notes down from the second photo, you always can come back to taking more notes. I will be posting both of these photos into the exit ticket along with this video. So just to wrap up, today's lesson was thinking about how do our holidays that we're celebrating today bring up moments of our past, and how has our history of voting changed over time? Okay, so knowing a few different things about the systems of voting and our history of voting, I want us to consider the time periods that both of these photos were taken. So that could be another wondering or even a question. It's hard to make an observation of when a photo is exactly taken, but that absolutely can go into your observations wondering. Like, I wonder if this was before the Voting Rights Act. I wonder if this was after 1924. Okay, so once you write down all of these observations about these two photos, You are excused to go to Makerspace. I am going to wrap up today's lesson. Thank you so much for hanging in there. It is a short and sweet lesson for today. Take care, and I will see you all for closing.